There is a city that has stood for 5,000 years. It survived the Israelites, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, and the Ottomans. Every empire that tried to erase it failed. Damascus endured them all. And yet, sitting in the book of Isaiah, written 27 centuries ago, is a single verse that opens with a decree no geopolitician would have dared write. Damascus will cease being a city, not occupied, not diminished, removed from the category of city entirely. We are in Isaiah 17. What Isaiah gives us here is not just a prophecy against a single city. He gives us a template, a pattern so precise and so repeatable that it is played out across every civilization that forgets where its strength actually comes from. In 732 BCE Assyria, in 1521 CE Mexico, and even in our own time. Among all collapses in recorded history, few follow Isaiah's sequence as cleanly as the fall of the Aztec world. We will trace this ancient oracle alongside the rapid, haunting destruction of Tenochtitlan, revealing how the same spiritual and political mechanics governed both the Fertile Crescent and the Valley of Mexico. As we move from the morning of Moab in chapter 16, a nation searching for a refuge that would not hold, we enter a new, heavier prophetic weight. We are deep inside the oracles against the nations, each introduced by a single Hebrew word, masah. It means burden. But this chapter isn't just about Syria, it's a dual oracle. From the very start, the fate of Damascus is intertwined with the fate of Israel, specifically the northern kingdom of Ephraim. They formed an alliance based on power rather than principle. Isaiah warns that because they rose together in rebellion, they will fall together. This is the universal template. The whip used to strike others eventually becomes the subject of the strike itself. Let's look at how an empire actually dissolves. In the opening verse, the prophecy declares,
A prophecy against Damascus. See, Damascus will no longer be a city, but will become a heap of ruins.
The Hebrew key here is musar me'ir. It literally means removed from the category of a city. It's not just conquered or occupied, it is unmade. It becomes a paila, a disorganized heap of debris. This is a permanent monument to failure, clearing away a stagnant national spirit to make room for what's next. Think of the Aztec capital, Tenochtitlan, in 1521. As the empire fell, the Spanish didn't just move into the palaces, they dismantled the Templo Mayor, the very heart of the Aztec universe, to build their own cathedral. They unmade the form of the city. The stones of the old empire became the literal rubble foundation for a new world. But this collapse doesn't stop at the city gates. It ripples outward to the surrounding lands and rural networks. The prophecy continues in verse 2.
The cities of Aroer will be deserted and left to flocks, which will lie down, with no one to make them afraid.
The focus now shifts toward the consequences for Israel. Aroer was a city east of the Jordan. While Damascus had 365 streets for 365 idols, the Israelites of Aroer imported every single one, worshipping them daily. Israel didn't just ally with Damascus politically, they adopted its soul. When the center falls, the rural networks lose their protection. The land itself rejects its masters, returning to the silence of the wilderness. We see this in the aftermath of the Aztec collapse. Tributary towns were abandoned as the social fabric dissolved. Once bustling markets were reclaimed by nature, and European livestock began to roam deserted territories, marking a total reset of the land's purpose. This systemic failure eventually reaches the very heart of their defense, stripping away the strength they once relied on. In verse 3, Isaiah tells us,
The fortified city will disappear from Ephraim and royal power from Damascus. The remnant of Aram will be like the glory of the Israelites, declares the Lord Almighty.
The Hebrew word for fortress is mivzar. The very thing Ephraim relied on for security is stripped away. The alliance meant to multiply their strength instead multiplied their ruin. Their glory becomes ironic. It's the fading light of a nation that has exhausted its spiritual purpose. With the fortresses gone, Isaiah turns his focus from political structures to the people themselves, moving from a military metaphor to a deeply personal agricultural one. In verse 4 he says,
In that day the glory of Jacob will fade, the fat of his body will waste away.
The Hebrew key is yiddal, to waste away or grow lean. Israel's glory isn't destroyed in a single blow. It wastes away like a body in consumption. This is a slow, grinding reduction, a thinning that acts as a purification. It's the stripping away of the outer shell of wealth to see what remains of the core. This was literal for the Aztecs. Smallpox and famine thinned the population more effectively than any sword. The empire, which had grown fat on tribute, found its resources drained and its body politic starving from within. Isaiah continues this imagery, describing the final collection of what remains of the nation as the harvest begins in verse 5.
It will be as when a reaper gathers the standing grain and harvests the ears with his arm, as when a man gleans heads of grain in the valley of Rephaim.
Imek Rephaim is the valley of the giants. It sits right at the gates of Jerusalem. The Kotzire, the reaper, is the methodical force of history. The harvest sweeps everything up to the very walls of the holy city. It is patient and complete, leaving nothing but empty stalks. In the final months of the Spanish conquest, the loss of Aztec life was so concentrated it resembled a harvest of souls. The reaper cleared the grain of resistance until only the empty husk of a society remained. And yet, even in this absolute clearing of the field, a small, hidden spark of life survives. Verse 6 offers this hope.
Yet some gleanings will remain, as when an olive tree is beaten, leaving 2 or 3 olives on the topmost branches, 4 or 5 on the fruitful boughs, declares the Lord, the God of Israel.
Olelot are the gleanings, the she'arit is the remnant. Even in total devastation, survivors cling to the topmost branches where the beating of the tree couldn't reach. This holy spark ensures that while the empire dies, the soul of the people carries the future into a new form. This is why Nahuatl culture survived in isolated mountain villages long after the imperial structure was dismantled. When everything else is stripped away and the fields are bare, the survivor is finally forced to face a fundamental truth. This leads us to the turn that almost no one talks about. Everyone reads the destruction, but almost no one reads the reckoning. In verse 7 it says,
In that day a man will look to his Maker, and his eyes will have respect for the Holy One of Israel.
The Hebrew word for gazing toward salvation is yisheh. In the moment of total loss, the survivor finally looks up, not to an alliance, but to their Maker, the Osehu. It is not nations that return, it is individuals. One man, one act of looking upward is what saves the remnant. Because he is finally looking up, he can now look down and see the things he used to trust for what they really are. Verse 8 continues,
He will not look to the altars, the work of his hands, and he will not respect what his fingers have made, nor the Asherah poles, nor the sun images.
The Mizbechot and Asherim were the work of human hands, the things we trust to save us. Devastation severs that attachment. When the Aztec pyramids failed to protect the people, they were forced to look away from the work of their fingers and reconcile with a new spiritual reality. The harvest doesn't just destroy, it purifies. But this spiritual awakening comes too late to save the physical structures of the past, leaving only a landscape of memory. Verse 9 says,
In that day their strong cities, which they left because of the Israelites, will be like places abandoned to thickets and undergrowth, and all will be desolation.
There is a distinction between a city that is simply captured and one that ceases to be a city. These cities lost their metropolitan essence and became disorganized piles of rubble. In ruins like Tlatelolco, the metabolic systems, the markets and the hierarchy were dissolved. The physical space remained, but it was abandoned to thickets, becoming a wasteland where Aztec life was erased. And why did this essence vanish? Isaiah points to the root of the rot in verse 10.
You have forgotten God your Saviour. You have not remembered the rock, your fortress. Therefore, though you set out the finest plants and plant imported vines.
The key is nit ena amanim, pleasant plantings or strange slips. These imported vines are the foreign ideologies and alliances we use for security. But forgetting the Zur, the rock, makes all growth superficial. While the Aztecs built a world on imported wealth and fear, they had no moral rock to stand upon. When the Spanish challenged them, that brittle foundation collapsed. Isaiah warns that rapid, unnatural growth leads to a tragic conclusion in verse 11.
In the day you plant them, you make them grow, and on the morning when you sow, you make them blossom, but the harvest will be as nothing in the day of disease and incurable pain.
The pleasant planting becomes a heap of grief. For the Aztecs, no amount of sophisticated gardening or urban planning could defend against the incurable pain of biological catastrophe. Their harvest was lost before it even reached the sun. But now, Isaiah pulls the camera back from the local tragedy to a cosmic wide shot, showing us the fate of the nations who brought this destruction in verse 12.
Woe to the many nations that rage. They rage like the roaring sea. Woe to the peoples who roar. They roar like the thundering of great waters.
Hamon Amim Rabim, the roaring of many peoples. The instrument of judgment always becomes the next subject of judgment. This is the chaotic mixture of nations that think they are in control before they are rebuked. To the Aztecs, the invaders were a many-nation force of Spanish and indigenous tribes that roared against them like an unstoppable sea. But look at how quickly that sea is stilled when the divine word is spoken in verse 13.
The nations will rush like the rushing of many waters, but he will rebuke them, and they will flee far away, chased like chaff on the mountains before the wind, like whirling dust before the storm.
The Ga'ar is the rebuke. It's not a battle. It's a sudden shift in the natural order. A Galgal is a rolling tumbleweed. The nations become confused and spin out of control. Think of the aftermath of Tenochtitlan, the whirling storm of conquistadors fighting over gold, which eventually triggered a whirlwind of inflation that blew away the Spanish economy itself. Everything culminates in one final staggering moment of reversal, where the timing of history is revealed in a single night. Verse 14 says,
At evening time, sudden terror. Before the morning they are gone. This is the portion of those who spoil us, and the lot of those who plunder us.
Erev is evening or chaos, Boker is morning or discernment. Empires feel invincible during the day, but evening is the end of their time. On December 8, 2024, the world watched this in real time. The Assad dynasty, which had plundered its people for 50 years, collapsed in 10 days. By evening, trouble. Before morning, the regime was simply no more. We saw it in the 19th century too. The Napoleonic invasion of 1808 acted as the evening terror for the Spanish crown, triggering a collapse of colonial authority. 300 years of rushing ended, and Mexico emerged as a sovereign nation. Isaiah 17 is 3 prophecies braided together. The oracle against Damascus, a city that survived everything until the day it didn't. The harvest of Israel, a nation that shared its allies' sin and fate. And the pattern, the truth that the whip that strikes always ends up broken. A city that lasted 5,000 years, gone in 10 days. An alliance that multiplied strength, multiplied ruin, a harvest that stripped everything except the gleanings, a man who lost everything and finally looked up. By evening, trouble. Before morning, they are no more. The word of our God stands forever. Would you like me to help you generate an AI-voiced sample of a specific paragraph to test the pacing?